Rosa Parks sits on a Montgomery city bus after a long day of work when a white bus driver turns around and points at her face. Says, "You, get up. White man needs your seat." What happens in the next 10 seconds doesn't just get her arrested. It ignites a 381-day revolution that transforms a 26-year-old unknown preacher into the most powerful voice America has ever heard. Montgomery, Alabama, December 1st, 1955. Thursday evening, 6:06 p.m. The Cleveland Avenue bus rolls through downtown Montgomery, picking up workers heading home after long shifts. Not a fancy bus, not a tourist bus. This is a working-class bus for working-class people. Metal seats worn smooth from decades of tired bodies. Windows fogged from breath and cold. The smell of exhaust mixing with sweat and cheap perfume. Temperature outside hovering around 40 degrees. The kind of southern winter that doesn't snow but cuts through your coat anyway. Rosa Parks boards at the Court Square stop. 42 years old, 5'3", maybe 110 pounds soaking wet. Wearing a dark coat, simple dress underneath, sensible shoes for standing all day. Works as a seamstress at Montgomery Fair department store. Skilled hands that spend 8 hours bent over fabric, pushing needles through thick material, making clothes for white customers who never bother to learn her name. She's tired. Bone tired. The kind of tired that settles into your joints and makes every step feel like walking through mud. She pays her 10 cents at the front, has to get off and reboard through the back door. That's the rule. Black passengers pay at the front, exit the bus, walk to the rear door, board again. Sometimes bus drivers pull away before black passengers can reboard. Happens all the time. Happened to Rosa 12 years ago with this exact driver, James F. Blake. She remembers his face, remembers standing in the rain watching his bus pull away with her dime still in the fare box, remembers the humiliation burning in her chest, vowed never to ride his bus again. But tonight she doesn't notice who's driving until she's already seated. The bus fills up stop by stop. Rosa sits in the first row of the coloured section, 11th row back, middle of the bus. Not the white section, not breaking any law, just sitting where she's supposed to sit. 3 other black passengers sit in her row, a man by the window, 2 women across the aisle. The bus gets crowded. More white passengers board at the Empire Theatre stop. The white section fills completely. 10 rows, all taken. A white man stands in the aisle, no seat available. He looks around, sees 4 black people sitting in row 11, looks at the driver. James Blake checks his rearview mirror, sees the situation. Every bus driver in Montgomery knows the protocol. When the white section fills, you move the coloured section back, 1 row at a time. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. Blake pulls the bus over to the curb, puts it in park, stands up from his seat, all 6'1", 200 pounds of him. Walks back through the aisle. Passengers on both sides lean away as he passes. He stops in front of row 11. 4 black passengers, 1 white man standing. Blake doesn't ask, doesn't request, commands. Says, "You'll better make it light on yourselves and let me have those seats." Nobody moves. The bus goes silent. 30 passengers holding their breath, the weight of 200 years pressing down on this moment. Blake says it again, louder this time, more edge in his voice. Says, "I said move." The man by the window looks at Rosa, looks at Blake, looks at the floor, stands up. The 2 women across the aisle exchange glances. They stand up too. Start moving toward the back, crowded back, standing room only. But they move, because that's what you do. That's what you've always done. That's what staying alive in Alabama requires. Rosa shifts her legs to let the man pass, slides over to the window seat he just vacated. But she doesn't stand, doesn't move to the back, stays exactly where she is. Blake stares at her. This small woman in her dark coat, this seamstress who won't stand. He's handled this before, handled it dozens of times. A hard look usually does it. A threat always does it. Nobody wants trouble. Nobody wants to go to jail. Nobody wants to end up like Emmett Till, beaten and dumped in a river for looking at a white woman wrong. Blake leans in, says, "Are you going to stand up?" Rosa looks at him, doesn't look away. Doesn't look down, meets his eyes with something he's never seen before from a coloured passenger. Not anger, not fear. Something else. Something that looks almost like peace. Says no. 1 word. Quiet. Calm. Final. Blake feels his face getting hot. 30 passengers watching, his authority being challenged. A coloured woman telling him no. He says, well, I'm going to have you arrested. Rosa doesn't flinch, doesn't beg, doesn't apologise, just says, you may do that. 4 words, no anger, no shouting, no tears, just a woman who has had enough, just dignity wrapped in a dark coat, just one human being refusing to pretend she's less than human. Blake storms off the bus, goes to a phone booth on the corner, calls the police. The bus sits there, engine idling, nobody moves, nobody speaks, 30 people sitting in silence, witnesses to something they don't fully understand yet, something that feels different from the usual humiliations, something that feels like the beginning of something. 2 police officers arrive within minutes, Officers Day and Mixon. They board the bus, walk down the aisle to row 11, to this small woman who won't move. Officer Day looks at her, says, why didn't you stand up? Rosa looks at him, asks a question back, says, why do you all push us around? Day doesn't have an answer, pauses for a moment, then says, I don't know, but the law is the law and you're under arrest. They take her off the bus. Don't handcuff her, not yet. Walk her to the patrol car, drive her to City Hall. Book her for violating Chapter 6, Section 11 of the Montgomery City Code. Segregation ordinance. Take her fingerprints, take her photograph, put her in a cell. But Rosa Parks is not just any seamstress who got tired one evening. She's the secretary for the Montgomery chapter of the NAACP, has been fighting for civil rights for 12 years, investigated rape cases, organised voter registration. This past summer she attended the Highlander Folk School in Tennessee, where they taught nonviolent resistance, civil disobedience, how to fight without throwing punches. She didn't just refuse to move. She was ready to refuse. E.D. Nixon gets the call around 6:30 p.m. Nixon is the president of the Montgomery NAACP, former Pullman porter, tough as railroad iron. Been waiting for a case like this, waiting for the right person. Not the first black person arrested for refusing to give up a seat. Claudette Colvin was arrested 9 months earlier for the same thing, but she was 15, unmarried, pregnant. Not the right symbol. But Rosa Parks, 42 years old, married, employed, respected, church-going, no criminal record, no scandals, the perfect plaintiff. Nixon bails Rosa out that night, asks her if she's willing to fight this, willing to be the face of a legal challenge. Willing to have her name in the papers, her life examined, her family threatened. Rosa looks at her husband Raymond. He's scared. She can see it in his eyes. But she's not scared anymore. She's tired of being scared. Says yes. Nixon starts making calls. First call is to Joanne Robinson, president of the Women's Political Council. Robinson has been waiting for this moment too, been planning for it, has a network of women ready to mobilize. By midnight, she's at Alabama State College, running the mimeograph machines. Prints 35,000 flyers, her hands turning purple from the ink. Doesn't stop until dawn. The flyers are simple. Say don't ride the buses to work, to town, to school, or anywhere on Monday, December 5th. That's the day of Rosa's trial. The flyers spread through Montgomery's black community like fire through dry grass. Churches, barbershops, beauty salons, pool halls, funeral homes. 40,000 black residents get the message through one channel or another. Stay off the buses. One day, show them what happens when 75% of their riders disappear. But E.D. Nixon is already thinking bigger. One day isn't enough. One day is a gesture. He needs a movement. And a movement needs a leader. He thinks about the ministers in Montgomery. The established ones are too careful, too connected to white power structures, too worried about their positions. He needs someone new, someone with credentials but no baggage, someone who can speak. He thinks about the young preacher at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. Martin Luther King Jr., 26 years old, PhD from Boston University, only been in Montgomery for a year. Hasn't had time to make enemies or allies. Has a reputation for intelligence, for eloquence, for something that's hard to name but easy to feel when he speaks. Nixon calls King on Friday night. Asks him to host a meeting of black ministers and community leaders at his church. King hesitates. He's new in town, has a 3-week-old daughter at home. His wife, Coretta, is still recovering from childbirth. He's not looking for trouble. But something in Nixon's voice, something in the weight of the moment, makes him say yes. December 5th, 1955, Monday morning, dark, cold, 5:45 a.m. Martin Luther King Jr. stands at his front window, coffee cup in hand. Coretta beside him. Baby Yolanda asleep in the nursery. They're watching the street. The South Jackson bus line runs right past their house. First bus of the morning, usually packed with black domestic workers heading to white neighborhoods. Cooks, maids, nannies, the invisible army that keeps white Montgomery running. King watches the headlights approach, his heart hammering against his ribs. This is the test. Will they stay off? Will fear win? Will habit win? Will the need for a paycheck win? The bus passes. King stares. Coretta grabs his arm. Empty. The bus is empty. Exposed seats visible through the windows. Not a single passenger. King runs to his car. Drives through Montgomery as the sun comes up. Checks bus after bus after bus. Empty. 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 A few white passengers here and there. 0 black passengers, 40,000 people who depend on those buses to get to work, to get to school, to get to the grocery store, to get anywhere, have chosen to walk. He sees them on the sidewalks, old women in church shoes walking miles to work, men in work boots trudging toward the industrial district, teenagers walking to school in groups, laughing, turning hardship into adventure. Some ride mules, some share taxis, cramming 6 or 7 people into cars meant for 4. Some roller skate. One man rides a horse down Cleveland Avenue. King pulls over, watches a woman who must be 70 years old making her way down the sidewalk. Slow but steady. He rolls down his window, offers her a ride. She smiles at him, says, "No, thank you. My feet is tired, but my soul is rested." That phrase becomes everything. The body suffers. The spirit soars. Rosa Parks goes to trial that morning. Takes 15 minutes. Guilty. Fined $10 plus $4 court costs. Her lawyer, Fred Gray, files an appeal immediately. This case is going to the Supreme Court, but that's the long game. The short game is happening on the streets of Montgomery right now. That afternoon, 18 ministers and community leaders gather at Mount Zion Church. They need an organization. They need demands. They need a leader. Ralph Abernathy suggests calling it the Montgomery Improvement Association. MIA. The name sticks. E.D. Nixon nominates Martin Luther King Jr. for president. King hesitates again. He's been in town 1 year. There are men in this room who've been fighting for decades. But those men have families, businesses, reputations to protect. King has nothing to lose but everything, and Nixon sees something in him, something the others don't have. Rufus Lewis seconds the nomination. The vote is unanimous. King accepts, doesn't know yet what he's accepting, doesn't know about the death threats coming, the bomb that will land on his porch, the knife that will pierce his chest, the bullet that will end his life. He just knows that history has knocked on his door, and he can't pretend he's not home. That evening, Holt Street Baptist Church, 7 p.m. The building holds maybe 1,000 people. 5,000 show up. They pack the sanctuary, the basement, the lawn outside. Loudspeakers carry the proceedings to the overflow crowd. Black Montgomery has never gathered like this. Not in living memory. Not ever. King has had 20 minutes to prepare his speech. 20 minutes to figure out what to say to 5,000 people who are scared, angry, hopeful, uncertain. 20 minutes to launch a revolution. He steps to the pulpit, looks out at the sea of black faces, tired faces, determined faces. Faces that have been told for 300 years that they don't matter, that they should accept, that they should move to the back and be grateful for the space they're given. King speaks, says we are here this evening for serious business. The crowd responds, yes, that's right, tell it. Says we are here in a general sense because first and foremost we are American citizens and we are determined to apply our citizenship to the fullness of its meaning. The call and response builds, the rhythm of the black church, the cadence of prophecy. Says, but we are here in a specific sense because of the bus situation in Montgomery. We are here because we are determined to get the situation corrected. Then King does something that transforms this local protest into something universal. He talks about Rosa Parks, introduces her to the crowd. She stands. The church erupts. Standing ovation. These people see themselves in her. Every time they move to the back, every time they stepped off a sidewalk to let a white person pass, every time they swallowed rage to survive another day. King waits for the applause to fade. Then he delivers the philosophy that will guide not just this movement, but movements around the world for the next century. Says, and I want to say that we are not here advocating violence. We have never done that. The crowd goes quiet. This is new. This is different. In a world that has only offered them violence, this young preacher is offering something else. Says, I want it to be known throughout Montgomery and throughout this nation that we are Christian people. We believe in the teachings of Jesus. The only weapon that we have in our hands this evening is the weapon of protest. King builds, his voice rising, the Spirit moving through him and through the crowd and through the walls of the church and out into the streets of Montgomery. Says there comes a time when people get tired of being trampled over by the iron feet of oppression. Yes. Yes. Says there comes a time when people get tired of being plunged across the abyss of humiliation. Preach. Says we are here because we are tired now. The church is on its feet. 5,000 voices becoming one voice. Something breaking open. Something being born. But King doesn't stop there. He gives them the harder teaching, the one that separates this movement from every rebellion that came before. Says we must not become bitter and end up by hating our white brothers. As Booker T. Washington said, let no man pull you so low as to make you hate him. Some in the crowd shift uncomfortably. Hate is easy. Hate is justified. These white people have earned hate 1,000 times over. King sees their resistance, addresses it directly, says we are not wrong in what we are doing. If we are wrong, the Supreme Court of this nation is wrong. If we are wrong, God Almighty is wrong. The crowd explodes again. This is what they needed. Permission to fight, permission to resist, but with love instead of hate, with dignity instead of destruction. Says, if we are wrong, Jesus of Nazareth was merely a utopian dreamer that never came down to earth. King pauses, lets the words settle, then delivers the image that will define the movement. Says, we, the disinherited of this land, we who have been oppressed so long, are tired of going through the long night of captivity, and now we are reaching out for the daybreak of freedom and justice and equality. The meeting ends with a vote. Continue the boycott until demands are met. Not one day. Indefinitely. The vote is unanimous, every hand raised, every voice saying yes. Nobody knows yet that this will last 381 days. Nobody knows about the suffering ahead, the walking in rain and snow, the lost jobs, the bombings, the beatings. They just know that something has changed, that they've stopped being afraid, that tired feet and rested souls might just be enough. Weeks become months. The Montgomery City Lines bus company bleeds money. Black passengers made up 75% of ridership. Now the buses roll through black neighborhoods nearly empty. The company begs the city to negotiate. The city refuses. The white power structure fights back. The mayor calls the boycott illegal. Police harass carpool drivers, give tickets for going 30 in a 25 zone, arrest people for vagrancy if they're standing on corners waiting for rides. Insurance companies, pressured by the city, cancel policies on black-owned vehicles. The legal system becomes a weapon. King is arrested for the first time on January 26, 1956. Speeding, 30 miles per hour in a 25 zone. They throw him in jail. It won't be the last time. But what happens 4 days later changes everything. January 30th, 1956. King is at a mass meeting at First Baptist Church, preaching nonviolence to another packed crowd. Coretta is home with baby Yolanda and a family friend named Mary Lucy Williams. Around 9:30 p.m., a car drives slowly past the King house. Someone throws something onto the front porch. The bomb explodes, shatters the front window, blows a hole in the porch floor, fills the house with smoke and glass. Coretta grabs Yolanda and runs to the back. Mary Lucy follows. They escape through the rear door, unhurt, barely. Word spreads through the black community in minutes. Within an hour, 300 people have gathered outside King's house, many of them armed, pistols, shotguns, knives, rocks, ready to retaliate, ready to burn Montgomery to the ground if their leader has been harmed. Police arrive. They're outnumbered. The mayor shows up, nervous, sweating, the fire commissioner, all of them looking at this crowd of armed black men and seeing the race war that could erupt in the next 5 minutes. King arrives home, sees the shattered porch, sees his terrified wife, sees his daughter who almost died, sees the crowd with their weapons and their rage and their readiness to avenge him. This is the test. The real test. Everything he's preached about nonviolence, about loving your enemies, about meeting hate with love, it all comes down to this moment. Easy to preach love when no one has bombed your house. Easy to talk about peace when your baby girl hasn't almost been killed. King steps onto the broken porch, raises his hand. The crowd goes quiet, says, "My wife and baby are all right. I want you to go home and put down your weapons. We cannot solve this problem through retaliatory violence." The crowd murmurs, resists. A man shouts that they can't let them get away with this. Another says it's time to fight fire with fire. King's voice rises, says we must love our white brothers, no matter what they do to us. We must make them know that we love them. The crowd stills. Something in King's voice, something beyond words. Says Jesus still cries out across the centuries, "Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, pray for them that despitefully use you." A woman starts crying. A man lowers his shotgun, says we must meet hate with love. Remember, if I am stopped, this movement will not stop because God is with the movement. One by one, the weapons lower. One by one, people start to leave. The police watch in disbelief. The mayor wipes sweat from his face. One white cop later says, "If it hadn't been for that end preacher, we'd all be dead." The slur reveals everything. Even in praising King, the officer strips him of humanity. But King has proven something tonight. Non-violence isn't weakness. Non-violence isn't passivity. Non-violence is the hardest kind of strength, the kind that refuses to become the evil it fights. The boycott continues. King teaches night after night. Transforms mass meetings into classrooms. Explains the philosophy behind the sacrifice. Tells them about Gandhi in India. How a small man in simple clothes brought the British Empire to its knees without firing a shot. How non-violent resistance works on the conscience of the oppressor. How suffering willingly accepted is redemptive. Tells them about Jesus. Not the meek Jesus of Sunday school paintings. The revolutionary Jesus who threw money changers out of temples. The strategic Jesus who told his followers that if a Roman soldier forces you to carry his pack 1 mile, carry it 2, because the law only allowed them to force you 1 mile. And carrying it 2 exposed the injustice and put the soldier in a moral crisis. Tells them about agape. The Greek word for unconditional love. Not romantic love, not friendship love, but a love that seeks the good of others regardless of how they treat you. A love that sees the humanity in your enemy, even when your enemy denies yours. Says hate is too heavy a burden to bear. I've decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. A young man stands up at one meeting, angry, frustrated, says he doesn't understand how they're supposed to love people who bomb their houses and spit on their children and call them animals. King doesn't dismiss the anger, honors it, says, "I understand, I feel that anger too. When I saw my bombed house, I wanted to strike back. But I've learned something. Violence multiplies violence. Hate multiplies hate. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." The young man sits down, not convinced, not yet, but listening. King explains his 6 principles of non-violence. First, non-violence is not passive, it is active resistance to evil. It takes more courage to face a mob without a weapon than with one. Second, non-violence seeks to win the opponent's friendship and understanding, not to humiliate or defeat them. Third, the attack is directed against evil itself, not against people caught up in evil. Fourth, non-violent resistance includes a willingness to suffer without retaliation, because unearned suffering is redemptive. Fifth, non-violence avoids not only external physical violence but internal violence of spirit. You must refuse not only to shoot your enemy but to hate him. Sixth, non-violence holds that the universe is on the side of justice, that the arc of the moral universe is long but it bends toward justice. Night after night, week after week, King teaches, and slowly something changes. People who came to the boycott out of anger find themselves transformed, find themselves unable to hate anymore, find that the burden they've been carrying for generations is lifting from their shoulders. November 13th, 1956. The Supreme Court rules in Browder v. Gale that bus segregation in Alabama is unconstitutional. The city of Montgomery appeals, but everyone knows it's over. The highest court in the land has spoken. December 20th, 1956. The order arrives. Montgomery must integrate its buses. December 21st, 1956, 381 days after Rosa Parks said no. Martin Luther King Jr. wakes up early, puts on a suit, walks to the bus stop on South Jackson Street. The same bus line he watched from his window that first morning. A bus approaches. King boards, pays his fare. The white driver looks at him, says, "I believe you are Reverend King, aren't you?" King says, "Yes, I am." The driver says, "We are glad to have you this morning." King sits in the front row, the row that was forbidden to him 382 days ago. Sits there because a seamstress refused to stand. Sits there because 50,000 people walked until their feet bled. Sits there because non-violent love proved stronger than violent hate. Rosa Parks boards a bus later that day, sits wherever she pleases, the front, the middle, wherever she wants. The seat she was arrested for refusing to leave is now her seat. Every seat is now her seat. What started with one tired woman refusing to stand became a revolution without rifles. What began as a local bus boycott became the template for movements across the world. What emerged from Montgomery's streets wasn't just desegregation. It was a philosophy, a method, a way of fighting that transforms both the oppressed and the oppressor. King would go on from Montgomery, would lead campaigns in Birmingham and Selma, would march on Washington and tell the world about his dream, would win the Nobel Peace Prize, would be stabbed by a mentally ill woman and survive, would be assassinated by a man with a rifle and not survive. But it started here, on a bus, with a woman who said no, with a preacher who said love your enemies, with 50,000 people who proved that tired feet and rested souls can bring the mightiest injustice to its knees. 381 days. That's how long it took. 381 days of walking in the rain, 381 days of threats and bombs and jail cells, 381 days of choosing love when hate would have been easier. Rosa Parks didn't throw a punch, didn't fire a weapon, didn't raise her voice. She just sat, just stayed, just refused to pretend she was less than human. And her refusal changed what it meant to be American. King didn't promise vengeance, didn't call for blood, didn't match hate with hate. He taught that how you fight matters as much as what you fight for, that the means shape the ends, that you cannot create a beloved community through methods that destroy community. So here's the question. Who in your life is telling you to move to the back? What system is treating you as less than human? And when you fight back because you will fight back, because you must fight back, how will you fight? Will you become the evil you resist? Or will you find the strength to fight with love? Because 381 days in Montgomery proved something that the world is still learning. Tired feet can defeat tired souls. Dignified suffering can shame undignified power. And love, real love, the hard love that refuses to hate, can transform not just laws but hearts. That's what Rosa Parks started when she said no. That's what Martin Luther King Jr. taught when he said love your enemies. That's what 50,000 people proved when they walked until the buses surrendered. And that's why a seamstress and a preacher changed the world.